Corey, you came up with this idea and you pitched it out, and I liked it because it's a great idea, but I also hated it because the answer I had was not super positive. When is the last time you felt like the Cowboys had a distinct coaching advantage? What led you to this?
Well, you've talked about this for years.
Sure.
Let's go back 2010, I believe, was when 2011, let's
right.
say. Jason Garrett. You didn't feel like with him and Rob Ryan that you had a coaching advantage. And so every year I've been like, okay, we do, we don't. And I was just kind of curious this year, you don't feel like your coaching staff has been a difference maker for your team. If your team is everything's good and everything's even across the board, can your coaching staff outcoach the guys on the other side of the field? And for some reason,
I don't think so.
I don't feel like it's been a while. But when I asked you this, you actually said it was sooner than I thought.
So my answer was last year, but it was last year for somebody who ain't here anymore.
That's right.
And so it was Dan Quinn. And that's why I kind of hated your question too, because I thought, well, that's not a good sign. If I was like, oh, yeah, it was just last year. But as a coach that went away and is now coaching another team in the division that is better than you or has a better record than you. And so that's what was concerning to me is my immediate thought was nothing from the Mike McCarthy era, which maybe people think that's unfair to him. But my thought was it was Dan Quinn the last couple of years and the turnover factory that this defense was. I felt like they could scheme to anybody and force the turnovers when you really needed them, not Mike McCarthy.
Your offense last year was number 1 in points.
Yeah.
Your defense last year in points was number 5. Your team 1 and 5 and 5, yards and points 5. And they were really, really good. The defense the year before that won the division or lost in the division round, they were 5th in points again in defense.
Yeah.
And when Dan Quinn got here, they were 7th in points in defense. So the entire 3 seasons,
it's pretty dang good.
that Dan Quinn was here, really good. The year that before he got here, 28th.
Wow.
This year, 31st.
Yeah,
and so,
holy moly.
Now, that being said,
hold on. Did you just say, so the bookend 28 before he got here, 31st now that he's gone, and in between 7th, 5th, and 5th?
Yes.
Yikes.
Yes. So, that's the quality of what that coach was putting out. Now, he had one thing that they did really well that destroyed teams, and he was like, we're pass rushing. We're gonna suffocate you with the pass rush, and that's gonna force turnovers. You're not gonna put as many points on the board. Now, what we saw, there were some teams that knew how to beat that.
Sure.
And so that was but for the most part, you were able to overcome everybody. Now, go look at the offense, Kevin. The last 3 years while Dan Quinn was here, 1-4-1.
They've been very good.
And this year they're 21.
Okay.
So with a bad defense, they're a bad offense also?
Now, I know part of the argument, at least for the last month or so, is going to be that you've been without Dak. But make no mistake about it. This offense was struggling when he was here as well. And I know people will argue this pretty much forever, right? Was it the offense that benefited directly from the defense, or was it the defense that benefited directly from the offense being able to hold on to the ball and methodically at times move it down the field? The answer is probably both.
Can I ask this based off of the Quinn was a major advantage, and I do like him, don't get me wrong. How much was it Quinn and how much has it been Micah Parsons? Because this defense was horrible this year without Micah Parsons. Sure. Micah Parsons comes back, and they're, I don't want to say good, but they're like a solid defense.
Yeah. They weren't good with him before, though. So it did take a minute for him to get integrated into the Zimmerman or the Mike Zimmer defense.
True.
And now it looks like that, actually, it kind of looks like that injury helped him see the defense a little better, understand what his role and what his job was supposed to be. So I think that Micah Parsons has a huge hand in it. Definitely. I also think the relationship, the marriage of him and Dan Quinn was wonderful. Yeah. And you see the divorce and new girlfriend with Mike Zimmer is kind of setting him up for really good success right now. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of people probably have the answer I have, so I don't think I'm going.
Jimmy Johnson?
Well, I'd say Bill Parcells. When he took Quincy Carter to 10-6, and I was like, how is this team in the playoffs? I think they lost to Carolina his first year in the playoffs. But I'm like, how in the world did he take Quincy Carter? And now people that are Cowboy fans, and nothing, Quincy might be listening because I know he lives in the Metroplex.
And he is a fan.
I'm not taking a shot at Quincy here, even though it's going to sound like it. But I'm like, how in the world did he take a dude who couldn't win football games on a consistent basis, and he took that same quarterback, and now people here think Quincy Carter is a good NFL quarterback. Now, quickly, obviously, Quincy had his issues, and in a way, luckily he did because it kept Tony Romo in the Dallas Cowboys organization. But I just remember that year going, this dude has to be a genius to take this team, this quarterback, and get it to the playoffs when it looked like it was still in a major rebuilding process after 3 5-11 seasons.
Yeah, because, Kevin, I'm looking at 13-3 from the Jason Garrett 2016 team, and I feel like that was all talent. They won in spite of coaching with Linehan and Marinelli.
All right, I'm glad that you brought that up.
But I'll take it back to Wade Phillips with Jason Garrett and, I'm sorry, the defensive coordinator at the time. But I'll take it back to Wade Phillips' 13-3 year when he had Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator and Brian Stewart as his defensive coordinator, because Wade Phillips he's a definite advantage as a defensive coordinator on the field.
And that's another argument that I know sometimes RJ drives people crazy with his coaches don't particularly matter, but I do kind of struggle whether you're talking about Micah Parsons. Is it Dan Quinn? Or is it a potentially generational defensive player coming along in Micah Parsons? Going back to 2016, did we have a coaching advantage? Or was it the fact that, and never forget this, make no mistake about this, Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott absolutely took the NFL by storm. They were the biggest story in the NFL, not locally, nationally.
That was an injection of youth into the team and hope based on the fact that they were like, oh no, another Romo year. And then it turns out, hold on, we actually have something. And it was all these veterans that were just ready to go.
Yeah. And so do I give some credit to the coaching staff? I don't think you should give no credit to the coaching staff. But at the
they rode a wave.
But at the same point, Ezekiel Elliott, I know eventually the draft pick got made fun of. He was unfreaking stoppable that first year. Like unstoppable. There was never a game they were in that I thought they were going to lose. And you saw it with, I think it was Pittsburgh and Green Bay, and not the second Green Bay game. Well, they made comebacks and won. And so I do sometimes have a tough time balancing that out. It's like, how much of the credit does Jason Garrett get versus the veterans that you mentioned, versus Zeke exploding on the scene, versus Dak Prescott taking over?
I always felt like that Jason Garrett was the hand on the wheel guy, and it was never that he was the difference, but he was the reason that it never went too far one way. Like that's why you were 8-8 so many times around him, because it was just always steady, but it never felt like you were going to have the difference. Now, when Mike McCarthy arrived, I really did think, man, this guy has some ideas that I really like, especially with the West Coast offense. I think the West Coast offense is fantastic. Can you advance the West Coast offense? Yes, people have. And I don't feel like he necessarily has. He's like, I got this book of plays that I really like. So I still feel like I'm losing it there. Now, what I'm starting to see, though, with this defense is I do feel like I have an advantage there. And then it comes to Bones. When it comes to Fossil, I don't know if I have an advantage in special teams. And I don't know the last time I felt like I had a special teams advantage. I know he's good, and I know he'll take a risk. But I don't know that I'm just like, we have the best special teams out there because of that guy.
But
special teams is hard to create.
Is it the fake punts to nowhere that like pulled you back in?
You're like, why did you do it?
Yeah.
And why did it should everybody knew that it was happening.
Yes.
Does he get the credit for Aubrey? Did he find him? Is that who?
I think Dak found him. I really
is that
do.
right?
I really do think that was the case.
Well,
I don't know.
Thank you very much, Dak Prescott.
But whoever did deserves a lot of credit for that. And I get it. That Fossil is a big risk taker.
Yes.
As a coordinator. And I think you have to be allowed to do that through the head coach, though. Because I'm sure that the head coach could say, shut that S down.
Yeah.
And obviously McCarthy has said, don't.
Yeah.
Keep trying different things.
No, I think that's fair. The thing that's got me kind of down about this is it seems like the consensus we've come to is it's probably been a minute. Mm-hmm. But then I wanted to ask on the other side, Who are the coaches, whether it's a coordinator like Ben Johnson, whether it's a head coach like O'Connell, that you think like, I think they bring an advantage to the table? Are those the people that you have in mind?
Ben Johnson does.
Yeah.
Like offensively, the way he calls the game. I'll go back to, I think Dan Campbell's an advantage too, because of the way Dan Campbell unabashedly goes about his business.
He really does.
We are this, and I don't care what you think about it. We're going for it. We're aggressive. And that's the way, like, Ben Johnson calls aggressive games because his head coach allows him to be aggressive, wants him to be aggressive. Now, would Ben Johnson be the same kind of guy if he got away from Dan Campbell and got away from that protection of Dan Campbell being able to say, I'm going to take on anything that goes bad, I'll take it. Don't worry about it. So I don't know the answer to that because I haven't seen it. Joe Brady, I think, is a difference maker. Look what he's done with that Buffalo offense that honestly, we thought it was going to be like, this year.
Oh, totally. I thought they were going to backslide for sure.
Yeah, Joe Brady is definitely a difference maker. I feel like Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator is a difference maker. I have no clue about head coach because it sounds like he got screwed over there. So, yeah, there are a lot of other guys in. So Bobby Sloak's a really interesting name because Houston's not great this year.
Yeah.
Their injuries on the offensive line have been a big plague, but hey, man, everybody gets injured. How are you going to respond and overcome that? But yeah, there are plenty of names that I still think are difference makers for teams. Shanahan's one.
Okay.
Bill Belichick is a defensive-minded difference maker.
And I just wanted to make sure there were plenty of names there because if we took a step back, we're like, I don't think they bring us an advantage. And we're like, who does? And we're like, I don't know. But you just listed
there are other people out there, yeah.
Coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and the point is they're not here, and it feels like they haven't been here for a while.
Yeah, and at some point you'd like to have the coaching staff that gives you the difference in a game, that gives you the edge in a win.
And that's why I'm not saying this is going to happen at all, but just hear me out. That's why whenever I know people are all up in arms because Stephen Jones said, hey, I think the offseason is going to be similar to the last offseason.
What'd you expect?
We don't have a lot of money. That's where there's no salary cap on coaches. So, like, let's say Ben Johnson wants $15 to $20 million. You can, if you would write the biggest check in the world to win a Super Bowl.
You just surpassed 11 digits on the value of your team.
So go out and get him. It costs you nothing against the cap, but that can be a huge addition to your team.